We are live. Hello, Facebook. I'm just going to give it a few minutes again, let people jump in. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. It's been a stressful week. Do you guys have a stressful week? I had a stressful week. And however, I will tell you the last 24 hours have been a little bit of a turning point. Had a really good day today. Effective day, lots of things falling into place. And wow, bunch of people there. And I'm going to just wait for some more folks to come in and then I'll get started. Our topic tonight, why compliance and expertise are killing your organization. Or I think I said why following orders and expertise may be killing your organization. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Hello there, Tom Altaffer in sunny, warm Arizona. I'll contain my resentment while I'm on the cast. And although it's getting warmer here, so I can't complain all that much. And I'm getting some weird stuff going on with the feed here. I'm not sure what that's about with the picture. But anyway, I'm just going to jump in. So because it's a busy night, but and once again I said the other day, I said last night actually, I said to myself, I can't do this every night because I've got so many other things to do. But today when I was riding around, this thought came to me, this idea, this topic, and I said, "Ooh, I just need to do like a short cast on that." And while I was seriously, and then I was laying out my notes, and as happens with me, one thought leads to another, and I thought, oh, there's some really kind of juicy stuff here, so why don't I share it, see where it goes, see what kind of engagement, feedback, questions people have, and then we'll go from there. But the topic tonight, as I said, is why following orders and expertise may be killing your organization. And that's all in the spirit of helping people adapt, develop new mindsets as the world is changing, and essentially help empowering people. By what I do is I help big thinkers create organizational cultures that redefine industries and change the world. And so this is really about 21st century mindsets and trying to grasp how the world is changing around us and developing non-reactive mindsets, developing really proactive mindsets that help us really act effectively, work effectively in organizations and in other groups, social settings, or social groups and other collective settings. So as I said, tonight I'm talking about why following orders and expertise may be killing your business. And the topic really is about effectiveness. Okay, that's what we're going to look at. It's about the nature of effectiveness and why following orders and expertise may actually undermine effectiveness. And that's going to seem sort of counterintuitive because when you think about it, business is obsessed with effectiveness and getting the job done. But really, we're in a time where to excel, we have to dig deeper into the notion of effectiveness, what it means, how we do it, and what it actually entails these days, because it has changed radically. For a lot of leaders, the goal is to be effective, but what's happening is that by holding on to old mindsets, what they do is they undermine organizational effectiveness and attainment of larger goals. What helps to understand this is actually stepping back a bit and to understand that in the last 30 or 40 years, not only has the nature of business changed, it's changed radically, but so has the nature of what we might think of as effectiveness or the mechanics of effectiveness. That has changed as the nature of business and society has changed itself. So in order to kind of understand what we're talking about, what I want to do is step back for a second and define the notion of effectiveness. And you can define it a lot of different ways. I mean, I said simply like getting the job done. But let's think about this for a second. Excuse me, my nose itches. I'm going to cut that part out of the final video. Effectiveness for our conversation tonight is really about the successful application of, this is how I define it, the successful application of actionable knowledge by a group of people for the purpose of achieving a predetermined goal. So another way of looking at that is applying knowledge to get the job done. That is, in most circumstances, how people would define when they're being effective. However, in the last 30 to 40 years, the notion of this process, applying knowledge to get the job done, it's changed radically. It has gone through two distinct cycles, and actually what's happening now is that we are entering into the third. The challenge that represents is that if we apply the same principles that we applied through the first two cycles, we're going to find that we actually undermine organizational effectiveness and attainment of goals. And I'm saying organization, but I really mean any kind of grouping or endeavor where you are undertaking to solve or address complex problems. So as I said, we've gone through two cycles. We're now entering into the third. And I've talked a little about this in previous casts that I have done. In the first era, or the first cycle, it was the industrial era, and it was defined, that was the factory era, durable manufacturing, and effectiveness in those settings was really defined by the compliance with established protocols, following predetermined formulas, fixed formulas for getting a job done, getting something made, getting a service rendered in a way that met the universal laws, universal principles of the one best way to get that thing done. So in that kind of system, in a factory system, effectiveness really depended upon compliance. The more compliant you were, the more effective you were. I'm just going to take a step back for a second. This was a mindset that was very important and popular during the industrial era. And I'm talking from the 1930s up until probably the 1980s, 90s. The problem is that that same metric, compliance to predetermined standards, that same metric is still largely applied to so many business situations, especially when they are dealing with complex problems. The problem is that actually undermines the ability to get problems solved and get the job done. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. The second era of business is the technological era, and that was the 1980s to the early 2000s. And in that era, what really defined effectiveness was not compliance to predetermined standards. What really defined effectiveness was the collaborative use of expertise. Knowledge became more refined. Problems became more complicated. They were not solved by rule of thumb. They were not solved by following common sense. They were often solved by applying specific, refined knowledge to a complicated situation. So when you talk about the computer industry, when you talk about the early iterations of biotech and healthcare, things like that, what you saw was you had experts that would collaborate in order to solve problems and create effective solutions, pooled knowledge. So the key there was how people worked or collaborated effectively in order to share expert knowledge. At this point now, what we're doing, hey there, Gord. At this point, what we are entering into is the third iteration of what some people are calling an industrial revolution, the third industrial revolution. And we went through the manufacturing stage, we went through the technology stage, and now what we're entering is the networked stage, where knowledge, communication, processes are all networked through a central processing system, usually in the cloud. Okay? A lot of knowledge moves very rapidly. It moves through complex networks. What defines effectiveness now is not compliance. It is not expertise. It is actually what is called collaborative sense making. Okay, and I'm going to step back a little bit and define that because sense making is a lot different than compliance. It's a lot different than expertise. In systems where you are applying or you're solving the problem through compliance, there's a very predetermined problem and a predetermined solution. These days, in our networked era, what is happening is businesses are frequently facing problems that are not clearly defined, and the solution is not clearly defined. And while compliance and expertise may play a role in those solutions, they are not the dominant driver of effectiveness. The dominant driver is what is called collaborative sense making or sense making. Sense making, unlike expertise, is not based on refined absolute knowledge. It's based on the open sharing of uncertainty because it is based on integrating knowledge, compliance, uncertainty, intuition, context, and relationship. A lot of things that those last three things, uncertainty, context, and relationship, they've typically not been a part of what would be called effective business over the last, last several generations. But what we're going to find moving forward is that those things are absolutely critical. And I can say this with just a small amount of certainty because this is what I found when I did my research on teams that were effective in highly disruptive environments. The number one determinant was not compliance, it was not expertise. It was the ability to safely share uncertainty in a group format. What they did was they worked through solutions through a process that was then identified as being collaborative sense making. They made sense of a highly complex, highly ill-defined situation collaboratively through very often sharing their vulnerability and their lack of clear knowledge. So anyway, the key things I'm talking about in an environment where sense making is key to effectiveness, there are four key requirements that I've found. And the first is this notion of psychological safety, which means the people in that environment feel safe being vulnerable and sharing uncertainty. The second is shared experience. The people in the environment very often have worked together previously solving very difficult or complex situations. Interdependence. There's a strong feeling amongst the group that they need each other to solve the problem. And here's key. The managers in that situation were always reaffirming staff or the people below them how important their role is in the process so that people who were lower on the food chain were meant to feel empowered and part of the solution, not disempowered or inconsequential. That was key. And the fourth thing was mindful attunement, which means that people had a mindful approach, a questioning curiosity to what was going on. They were not comfortable in their own certainty. They were not comfortable in their own knowledge. They were aware that they had to be tuned into everything that was going into the environment. So the key factors to collaborative sense making were psychological safety, shared experience, interdependence, and mindfulness. So in those instances, in those kinds of problem-solving situations, what people find is that, yes, you do need compliance, a certain degree of compliance, you do need a certain degree of expertise, but those things were subservient to sense-making. So I want to throw something out there is just if you're listening, you're part of an organization, you're working with groups, I want to provide some actionable strategies, just a little bit. And I'm going to ask, like, the next time you are faced with a complex situation and a complex problem-solving situation, it may not, if you're in an organization that is used to solving problems by compliance or expertise, it's going to be difficult to just get a lot of buy-in to a sense-making mindset. But what you can do is find a small pocket of people, maybe two, three other people, where you can go off into a corner or a conference room or have a lunchtime conversation. And in that setting, start to have what I would call a sense making conversation. And a sense making conversation starts out usually by, rather than admitting or sharing what you do know, sharing what you don't know, or what's baffling you, or what's uncomfortable, or what feels vulnerable about the situation. That's counterintuitive, especially if you are used to a traditional, what's called brainstorming approach, which has a lot to do with throwing like various ideas. This is a little bit different. It's almost the obvious, because what you're trying to do in that situation is you're trying to unload the resistance and defensiveness that people might have. You're trying to get that cleared out of the way. You're trying to make it a safe space to share. And then when you do that, what happens is intuitive ideas start to flow to the surface. Or what happens is that there's a certain openness to trying things that otherwise may seem too far out of the box. So what you want to do is create an environment where it might be safe for people to share their limitations and their insecurities and see what comes up as a result of that. So, if you want to know more about this, also, I have an article out there called The Collapse of Expertise and Rise of Collaborative Sense Making. If you're interested in learning more about that and seeing the article, just leave the comments. You leave a request in your comments, and I'll be sure to get that out to you. Also, one other thing, my website, my new website is going to be going live hopefully within the next week. We've been working pretty diligently on getting the parts the moving parts together for that. If you're interested in being notified about when that goes live, and if you want to know the URL, also leave a comment in today, and I'll make sure that I put you on the list and get you a shout out to you when that happens, so you're in tune. And also, if there are other topics that you want to hear about, or if there's stuff that I touched upon that you want to know more about, please let me know, because what I'm finding as I do these is that the conversations that I have with people offline are really enhancing what I'm seeing is important for folks. So that's it for tonight. I want to thank people for tuning in. I'll just say, like, keep thinking big, keep redefining your businesses, and keep working on changing the world. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.